So for today's video, we have a very special guest. This is something that doesn't happen very often, but it's a pleasure to have you here, David.
Thank you.
Do you want to take a minute and just introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure. Yep. So my name is David Bergeron. I'm a curator at the Bank of Canada Museum. So we manage Canada's national currency collection, money, all sorts of money from Canada, of course, different time periods, but we also have an extensive collection of money from around the world, just to kind of give context to our collection.
So the reason why we have David here today is to talk about a very interesting period of history in Canadian currency, and that's a time in New France when actual playing cards were used as currency.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So New France was a French colony from the first discoveries or the first foundation of Quebec City in 1608 by Samuel de Champlain. And so over the years, French people were coming to settle along the shores of the St. Lawrence and then further west into Ontario. And then there was also Acadia and New Orleans, which were French possessions, French colonies at the time. And so as they were emigrating to Canada, they were bringing with them the money that they were familiar with, of course being French coins, French livre coins. And that was the monetary system that was in use in the colonies during the French regime. So the thing is that they didn't really have the authority or the means to strike their own money. And so they had to rely on shipments of coins to come from France to New France. And
by boat, I assume.
Exactly, by ship. And the discovery, the problem they encountered was, who was using these coins? Well, of course, they were used in everyday transactions by settlers to pay the merchants.
Right.
But they realized that really the problem was it was the merchants that had to pay for the goods that were being shipped to them from France, and they were paying them they were paying for those goods in coin. And so not only were the coins arriving by ship, but they were also going back,
being taken back
to France by ship because they had to pay for their goods. So New France at the time was always faced with a shortage of what we call a hard currency, which is gold or silver coins, because that was the money that mattered. And so in the late 17th century, there were problems arising, especially during the fur trade, and so Louis XIV sent out garrisons of troops to help protect the fortifications of the fur trade posts. And really what was going on was there was an illicit trade of fur with the English, but there was also these constant skirmishes with local Native American tribes that were really problematic.
Right.
So Louis XIV, the King of France, sent over troops to protect or fortify the fur trading posts. In normal times, people could find ways around the shortage of money by working on a system of trade or credit to say, okay, I'm going to bring you my crop in the fall if you give me food or sustenance for the rest of the year. And so often, they relied on just trading and credit system, in order to conduct transactions. But when it came to paying the troops, really what matters was they wanted to be paid in money, right? And your troops only work for you if they're paid. So in 1685, the intendant of New France, his name was Jacques de Mille, he was faced with a problem he didn't have enough coins to pay the troops. And so he had to have recourse to something in order to satisfy their needs. And that's when he came up with this idea of using playing cards as a temporary money, an emergency money.
That's right, it was just supposed to be temporary at the time.
That's right, yeah, It was supposed to be very temporary. So he took actual playing cards, and it didn't matter what was on the front of the card. So whether it was a Jack of Hearts or Queen of Spades or even a Three of Diamonds.
So the front didn't mean anything.
The front of the card is not what mattered. The back, what mattered was his signature with those of the governor and the minister of the Marine, and having a value, and that kind of gave it
that was sort of
value,
authenticity.
Exactly. And so, and then those would be paid out to the troops. And the troops, of course, would be encouraged or asked to spend them regularly, and so they would go buy things with it. And in the springtime, when the ship came from France with a fresh batch of coins, then in theory the playing card money would be redeemed for actual coins.
So take their playing cards and go to the ship and trade them in for actual coins.
Yeah. Okay. So the first time around it worked, and what happened was that this was all done without the authority of the king, because the issue of currency was a royal prerogative. It was only the king that could mandate the issue of currency. So to do this without his blessing, so to speak, was
not good.
Not good. So the intendant actually did it on his own account. So he guaranteed the value, and it would be through his own liability that he would cover the value of the card money, or the playing card money at the time. However, the first issue was successful. All of it was supposedly redeemed, and they thought they were done with it.
Okay.
However, the whole idea of just kind of persisted. The ship didn't come with enough coins, and so there were subsequent issues of playing card money, again, to satisfy the need to pay the troops. Right. Because, in fact, there were some occasions where a ship loaded with coins was bound for Quebec, or for Canada, and in fact the ship would sink. And on board with the coins. So there's a famous shipwreck. It's called Le Chameau. And it sank off the shores of Cape Breton in 1725. And on board was a whole mass of gold and French gold and silver coins. Wow. And so in those situations, again, you have to pay the troops. Yes. So that's when they often had to have recourse to playing card money for the small transactions. Right. So what they did is, as I mentioned, they'd sign the backs of the playing cards, but what they also did was they cut them into different shapes or into different sizes to distinguish between the different values, because a lot of people couldn't read, and so it was a way for them to identify what were the different values of the different playing cards. So
some of the corners would be cut off.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, you could cut one in half, and it would be a smaller value than one with the corners cut, or one that was cut into thirds, or anyways, any way to try to distinguish the various values. And the values range from 3 sols, which is a very small amount, to 24 livres, which is quite a significant amount. So a full card was 24 livres, for example.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long did this go on for? How long did they use playing cards as currency for?
So it is believed that the use of playing card money was for about, I was going to say about 40 years, 35 to 40 years. And it ended in 1720 when the king finally put out a law saying you got to stop this, stop the issue of playing cards. And it came at a time when France's economy was undergoing a boom, and there was a whole a reform in the economy to try to get it back on its feet, because the king just loved waging war, and because of that, he was spending a lot of money, and as a result, the country was near bankrupt. And so a Scottish economist by the name of John Law was hired to try to prop up the French economy. And so in 1720, he opened up France's first bank and issued paper money to try to fill the void of a lack of silver and gold coins. However, the notes that he was issuing were backed by land that in Mississippi. And so it was a very nebulous thing, and it was very speculative. And after the whole fiasco of the Mississippi company went bust, all the notes were rendered worthless, and so John Law was chased out of France, and so again the economy just fell into disarray again, and so they had to have recourse to another type of circulating medium. So this time, instead of playing cards, they just used regular pieces of cardboard. and this time with the authority or with the blessing of the king, they could reissue what we call card money. So they were just plain pieces of cardboard with the same thing, the signatures of the authorities, the value, and then a seal of the king to kind of authorize and to make it all official.
Right.
And so until the fall of New France in 1760, that was one of the types of forms of money that circulated heavily in New France. On top of that, there was other types of paper money, but they were more used for commercial transactions, so they were larger values. In the end, the underlying theme was that there was just not a lot of the good money in the colony. And so they always had to have recourse to some other form of money. And in the case of playing cards or anything that somebody could possibly accept as money, filled the need. But really, at the end of the day, it had to be the gold and silver that mattered.
Right. Yeah. So what happened to all these playing cards?
Well, good question. As far as we know, there are no actual examples of playing card money known to exist. And
no samples of
no samples at all.
Wow.
So I look at the designs you have on your coins here of the different suited kings. And I guess the inspiration was taken as much from a concept of what a playing card would have looked like at the time, simply because we have no idea what actual card money or playing card money looked like. However, apparently an archivist from the National Archives was visiting the archives in Paris in the 1920s and encountered some documentation that described what was playing card money. And so this person ended up drawing or creating sketches of what playing card money could have looked like. Now there's an example of that in the National Archives. Really, it's just a big piece of paper, and it has different sizes of card money or playing card money with just representations of the various types of
what they thought
playing
it
cards,
what
like
they
thought
the
it could have looked like.
Okay.
So really, we're just going by the inference of what types of playing cards would have been used at the time, with a description of how they were signed, how they were cut into different shapes and stuff like that. Like, I'm curious to know, how did you come up with these designs?
So these ones were interesting. It was actually a bit of a challenge for our artist to design these, because he had to simplify his designs, what he originally submitted. And I worked with a woman named Ruby Fougere, who is a curator in Louisbourg. When she originally looked at the designs, and while beautiful, they were just too complex for something that would have been used at the time. So what we had to do was really simplify the design, simplify the color, make it look as though it might have the original stamp for the card might have been carved into wood or something like that, just to make it look like it was a little bit more of an authentic, inspiration of what the cards would have looked like at the time. So it was a very interesting project to work on. So these ones all have very simple block colors and simple designs of the kings, and that was really that's how we got to the designs here.
I don't know if we go as far as saying as it was an attempt at counterfeiting card money, because obviously these are coins, but there's an interesting story that apparently counterfeiting of playing card money or card money took place, or it was happening, and I came across an anecdote from Ripley's Believe It or Not cartoon. I'm not sure if you're familiar with these cartoons.
Course, yes.
I think they date from the 20s, but so Robert Ripley would draw a cartoon of some sort of interesting fact or some outlandish event or something, and so apparently in the 1950s he drew a cartoon talking about an individual from Quebec City who was sentenced to have his hands tied behind his back for 3 years for counterfeiting card money.
Playing card money.
Yeah.
Well, I always wondered, how did they prevent these cards from being counterfeit? But I guess that's the threat of having your hands tied behind your back for 3 years is enough to really prevent somebody from wanting to do that again.
And I think because the whole point of them just being a temporary issue, there wasn't really any thought into security. Of course, when they would have issued these things. It was really very much just signing it and paying it out. But of course, there's always opportunists that will latch on to an idea and try to take advantage of it.
Try to become an artist.
Counterfeiting is as old as money itself, and so this is just another episode where somebody would have tried to counterfeit.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Well, these are. As we said, these are inspired by the playing cards that were used as currency in New France, and we have a set of 4 coins here available at mint.ca. Thank you very much for coming in today. It was a real pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Erica. Yeah, thank you.